Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. The focus this morning, though, that I want to share with you is this idea of mystics and activists. Mystics and activists. I don't think we're too used to hearing those words together. We often, I think, look at mystics are one kind of person and activists are another kind of person, and they're not the same person. And yet, we are at a place in our evolution as a human species, and we are at a place in our world where those two need to come together in each of us. The mystic who has a love for spirit, a love for God by whatever name that person calls God. The mystic and the activist who has a heart for working toward rightness, working toward justice, working toward fairness in the world for everyone. And one of the advantages I'm appreciating about my long journey in this teaching and in unity, I'm in my 41st year of ministry now. It's a lot of years. Thank you. It's a lot of years, and over that time, I've seen our movement, the New Thought movement, growing and emerging. And now these two are starting to come together, this idea of mysticism and this idea of activism. The Association for Global New Thought, a nonprofit organization that is the umbrella for all of our New Thought denominations, really coined the term about 20 years ago now, spiritually motivated social action. Spiritually motivated social action, to say that there is a different kind of social action that is needed than what we've perhaps seen in the past, the angry kind of activism, the divisive kind of activism. No, spiritually motivated social action. Or Unity's emphasis now on really looking at how do we actively work together to create a world that works for everyone, leaving no one and nothing behind. I shared with you a number of weeks ago from the platform and then in our email, the resolution that Unity Worldwide Ministries has put out about this very topic, about this very need for us to be actively engaged around creating a more racially equitable world for everyone. Yeah. And then you may or may not be aware of a term, and I believe it is primarily, its roots are in the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk. And Thich Nhat Hanh has talked about this idea of engaged Buddhism, which is a beautiful concept. I want to read to you the definition of engaged Buddhism. It refers to Buddhists who are seeking ways to apply the insights from meditation practice and Dharma teachings to situations of social, political, environmental, and economic suffering and injustice. This is what we are seeing is a change. We are seeing in not an either or activist or mystic, but we are seeing a movement toward them becoming expressed as one in each individual. What I want to speak to this morning is how do we nurture that? How do we grow that? An activist is a person who wants to bring about social or political change. A mystic is one who has a deep devotion to God, a deep devotion to spirituality, who ascertains truths not only from the intellect. Our very founder of the Unity movement, Charles Fillmore, was referred to as an American mystic. Charles Fillmore lived through some pretty dramatic world events. He lived through 2 world wars. He lived through the Great Depression. He lived through the 1918 pandemic. He was deeply grounded in what he called practical Christianity, meaning taking spiritual practice into one's individual life to make one's individual life better, to make one's individual life healthier, more prosperous, more joy-filled. He believed totally in the efficacy of spiritual practice and in the power of consciousness. I believe that were he alive today, he would be leading our unity movement in saying we don't drop the importance of our individual growth and work. We don't drop the importance of our individual relationship with Spirit, with the divine, with God. But we don't end there. We do not end there. We have each been equipped to take what we have learned and what we are learning of ourselves as spiritual beings and look with an open mind and an open heart at where are people hurting? Where does change need to be made? Where is my heart breaking open at what I see in the world? Where is your heart breaking open at what you see in the world? And while you still absolutely have to take care of yourself and you have to pay your rent or your mortgage and clothe yourself and your family and show up to work and all of those things, outside of what you must do, what will you do? What will I do in terms of applying in a very practical way our spiritual teachings into a world that needs to be changed, into a world that can be changed, into a world that can work better than what it has worked before. Here's what Harvey writes about mystics and activists and the importance of bringing them together and the challenges of the one or the other. He writes, mystics, I saw, were mostly addicted to being, activists to doing. Just take that in for a moment. Mystics, I saw, were mostly addicted to being, activists to doing. Both had profound narcissistic shadows that I recognized in myself. The mystic's shadow was a surreal disassociation from the body, the world, and the grueling tasks of implementing justice. Think about that. A lot of wisdom and insight into that. The mystic's shadow was a surreal disassociation from the body, the world, and the grueling tasks of implementing justice. The activist shadow lay in the Messiah and martyr complexes that accompany the addiction to doing, with its vulnerability to burnout, rage, and despair. Nod your head if you think he's onto something there. I really think he's onto something there. The mystic might have a tendency towards disassociation or disengagement from worldly things. I'm beyond that. I'm above that. I'm a spiritual being. Yes, you are, but you also have a body. And you and I also live in this thing called this physical world that can be very dense, both literally and figuratively at times. The activist who sees everything that needs to be changed and is going to go out there with fire and fury to change it, is probably going to make a lot of enemies in the path, a lot of collateral damage, and a lot of burnout. But when we are able to begin to fuse them and develop them and nurture them in balance and in harmony, we can bring forth something that is powerful. When we start to wake up to both the inner dimensions of life and to the outer state of the world, we often feel angry, afraid, or overwhelmed. Does that describe Your reaction to any of the things that you are seeing or have been seeing more clearly in terms of the world. Have you felt angry? Have you felt overwhelmed? Have you felt afraid? I know I have felt those things, angry and afraid and overwhelmed. Perhaps you remember the activist Julia Butterfly Hill. She said, in today's world, it's not only our right to be angry, it's our responsibility. The question is, do we act out of anger or love? That's what makes the difference. I was thinking of Jesus when I read that statement. Anger can motivate us to action. It can fire us up to do something. But where is that anger coming from? I think of Jesus in the temple. When he saw the money changers, he didn't just go up to them and say, hey, you shouldn't be doing that here. Let me help you clear the tables off. If you read the Gospels, he went in there and he threw the money changers out. That looks a little more like anger to me than it does, let's just work together and move these tables out. But I believe he was motivated by love. He was motivated by love. It's what is empowering us to look out and see the things that, as Butterfly Hill says, we have a right to be angry at things that are wrong, that things that are unjust, that things that need to be corrected. But the actions we take have to come from something different in us, has to come from our love, has to come from our ultimate caring about the other. In the book, Harvey writes about this idea, a term he coins called the third fire. And he says the third fire results when the mystic's passion for God fuses with the activist's passion for justice. I want to read it to you. It's a little bit long. It is so deep and rich what he's describing. He says, one night I dreamed I saw two rivers of flame meet in a sea of boiling fire, and I heard these words. When the two fires meet, and the third fire is created more powerful than ever. When I awoke, I understood that these two fires were the fire of the mystic's passion for God and the fire of the activist's passion for justice. These two fires were fused into a third fire. This third fire was the key to preparing and transforming the human race. If the fire of the mystic's passion for God could be married to the activist's passion to enact change, then a new kind of human being would be born. This human being would be grounded in universal, all-embracing, mystical truth and would be acting for justice in a local context with a global consciousness beyond national or tribal or religious boundaries. The mystic's shadow of addiction to being would be healed by the activist's focus on doing. The activist's shadow of addiction to doing would be balanced and transformed by the mystic's surrender to divine wisdom and joy. The fusion of the mystic's passion for God with the activist's passion for justice in one divine fire would heal the tragic split of our modern consciousness between masculine and feminine, between body and soul, light and matter, passion and peace, inner contemplation and outer action. That's powerful. That's the time I believe you and I have been born into. We've been born into a time and a set of world experiences that it is compelling us, number one, to stay awake, to not draw back and close our eyes because some of what we see might be frightening or upsetting or whatever negative response we have. Not to draw back, but to go deeper into our understanding of our oneness with Spirit and our oneness with each other. And let that feed us and empower us in such a way that we continue to stay engaged. Just like the term engaged Buddhism, engaged Judaism, engaged Christianity, engaged unity, engaged whatever unique path to God or path to spirit we want to call it. But not just that path that is the mystical tradition of that religion, but it married with the engagement of activism, of getting involved is really what we're talking about. Not just getting informed, but getting involved. And I know I'm speaking to so many of you in this room who are doing that. You are getting involved. You are making a difference. What can be so challenging, though, is we don't always get to see the difference that we make. And we can feel discouraged and think, what difference is my caring about the environment and changing the way I live in my lifestyle really making? What difference is it making if I'm writing that letter to my legislator about what I really care about? And maybe it is that by not getting to see the results as much as we might want to, as much as the human ego might want to, it keeps us humble, doesn't it? It keeps us, I think, doing what needs to be done for the right reason, not because somebody says, oh, wow, look at you, look at the difference you're making, but simply because in the privacy of our own thinking, we know that we stand for something that matters and that we are applying what we can to the issues at hand. Last week, I reminded you of something Harvey writes about and that I believe deeply as well, that our daily spiritual practice is essential to sustain us in whatever it is we're doing. I think it's essential to sustain us in our just living our ordinary lives, let alone the lives that we feel with regard to the difference we want to make in the world. We need to keep our spiritual practices alive. But with regard to the work in the world, and with regard to the shadow side of the mystic and the shadow side of the activist, Harvey suggests that there are 4 kinds of practices that we need to have in our toolbox. I'm going to mention them very briefly, but I loved the way he framed it. I'd never heard it this way before. He identifies that there are basically 4 kinds of spiritual practices, what he calls cool practices, not cool as like in hip, but cool as in temperature, cool practices, warm practices, prayer practices, and body practices. When he talks about cool practices, he says cool practices calm the emotions. They help put in balance the hot energy of the activist. So as we are out doing whatever we feel we're called to do to save a part of the world or heal a part of the world, we've got that fire of the activist burning. And he says to balance that and to make sure that that's kept in the right equilibrium, cool practices help us to do that. And he identifies many cool practices. I'll mention just a couple of them to you. Using a mantra is one of the cool practices. Om Mani Padme Om. Ra was Gandhi's mantra. The simple word Om, the word peace, just repeating that over and over and over and over, he says, is a cool practice that can help balance the hot energy of the activist. Mindful breathing that we can do in any moment, in any time, in any place. We don't have to have our eyes closed. We don't need any special equipment. We can do it standing in line. We can do it driving in the rush hour traffic or being stuck in rush hour traffic. Mindful breathing, just being aware of the breath in, being aware of the breath out, to bring down the hot energy of the activist, not to make it go cold and frigid, but to keep it so it's not so hot. It burns us out or causes so much collateral damage around us. He says the warm practices are important because they connect us with others. The warm practices keep our heart open
when we're threatened by compassion fatigue, when we care so very much that we are just emotionally exhausted and drained. He says these warm practices also help us to not mask the agony of the world, and in seeing the agony of the world, disengaging from it. That the warm practices serve to nurture our own heart and to keep our heart open to others. Sufi heart practices, you can Google them. Sufi heart practices can keep the heart open. The Buddhist meditation practice, loving kindness practice, is a powerful way where we start with a beloved being, spiritual being, or teacher that we hold in our mind's eye, and we affirm and see and have a short blessing statement that we feel, not just say, toward that in a silent meditation practice. But we don't end there. Then we include ourselves in that loving kindness meditation. And then we include in the next circle out those in human form that are our beloved, our life partner, our children, our family. And we stay with that for a while, keeping our heart open, and it's easy with people that we love. And then with the person at work, or the person that we're having difficulty with. And on until it reaches those that we would say are at the outer edges for us of our love. These are the warm practices that keep us engaged and refuse to pull us out of denial, refuse to pull us out of pretending that everything is all right when it's not. I won't go into the prayer practices. Unity is grounded in prayer. We have our prayer chapel upstairs. You can meet with the prayer partner. We send out prayers that you can use. And sometimes the prayers we have used in the past may not seem to work as well for us. Has that happened to any of you? Have any of the practices that you have always nurtured and fed you sometimes don't seem to work? I know that's happened to me. There are times that I have to change it up. There are times that I have to go much deeper into a particular prayer and really try to understand it and really try to be with it, to take it into that dark night of the soul experience. And then he identifies the body practices. And of course, some of the obvious things like yoga, Tai Chi, the physical martial art of Aikido. That if we don't take care of our bodies as we are doing whatever work it is that is ours to do in the world, whether it's just for our families or for the bigger world, what is the saying? Health is our truest wealth. We must take care of this physical form. Yes, we are eternal spiritual beings. But heck, we are moving through this physical form. And have you noticed as the years go on that it changes a little bit? That it seems to not work quite as well? I won't go any further than that. Maybe none of you in this room have any idea what it is I'm talking about. But taking care of our physical form. So take a deep breath in with me. And let that breath go. You've taken in a lot. I've shared a lot. We've talked about those two growing aspects within each of us that really do need to be and want to be cultivated. And I've got to believe you wouldn't be sitting in this room if you didn't resonate with at least some of that. And that is the mystic's heart in you and the activist heart in you. I'm not here to tell you what is your work to do in the world. And I know you're not here to tell me what is my work to do in the world. But we have each shown up at this point in time, and we have something to do beyond just what we are doing for ourselves and our families. And I'll leave you with that. Namaste.